My name is Joseph De Cruz. I work at the UN Development Program, and I was asked to come here and talk a little bit about what we can do to strengthen the role of CSR in development. And also, with a bit of a hidden agenda, why we do it. Let's see. It may take a second to connect through. Right, let me start with a very big picture. As a development organization, UNDP works on sustainable human development. About 15 years ago, most countries in the world got together and agreed on the Millennium Declaration, which set out a set of Millennium Development Goals that most, if not all, the countries in the world subscribe to. Those are coming to an end in 2015, next year. And as many of you may know, around the world right now, the global community is working on a set of new development goals and objectives for the next 15-year period. These are known as the post-2015 development agenda. Just recently, back in July, an expert working group that was put together to come up with goals came up with 17 of them. And these are now being discussed, negotiated amongst countries as a framework for development over the next decade and a half. Now, this is interesting because the original MDGs had 8 goals, most of which focused on basic needs and rights. Now, as the world has moved forward, we have 17 goals that include things which are of much greater relevance to the kind of discussions we're having here today. I've highlighted 2 of these here. The new development framework that the global community is negotiating has an explicit goal on access to energy. Access to energy as a fundamental right of development. It also has a goal on sustainable consumption and production patterns. And these are 2 which are going to form a very broad framework around which sectors and industries like the oil and gas sector and the extractive sector overall will work within the next 15 years. All right? Now, UNDP, why are we here? Why are we interested? Well, globally, we do a lot of work in areas that are of tremendous relevance to the oil and gas sector. We work, as you may know, on issues like poverty, on environment protection, conflict prevention, strengthening the rule of law, gender rights, all of which are issues that provide the framework within which effective, sustainable, transparent, productive sectors like oil and gas can function. We also incidentally do a lot of work in similar ways on mining for minerals, on forestry, access to resources, water, fisheries, etc. So we do a lot of work globally, working with partners in the private sector and government to set up the frameworks within which companies can operate, be transparent, be efficient, be productive and profitable, but also contribute very clearly to the good of the people in the communities within which and around which you work. Now, just a couple of examples here on the screen I'm not going to go into because I wasn't given the 2.5 hours I asked for. So, we do work, for instance, in Liberia, looking at issues like strengthening the local content policy and linking the global oil and gas mineral sector with local small and medium-sized producers. We also work in many other small countries on things like the development of oil funds, anti-corruption measures, as we talked about earlier. We look at working even in places as conflict-ridden as the Niger Delta, where we're looking at helping the government create frameworks to strengthen the inclusiveness of the oil and gas sector, reduce some of the conflict that's available there, that's happening there. Incidentally, we also worldwide work very directly with many companies that are active in the sector. Total, BP, Woodside, Shell, Esso, and others. Now, why do we do this? The first graph down here gives you part of the answer. As an organization that is focused on strengthening human development, it's very clear to see from these 2 lines that countries that are actually dependent on resources, by and large, have lower levels of human development than countries that don't. And that's a bit of a paradox. You'd think, as many would, that countries that are endowed with a rich natural resource base have the opportunity, as Norway did, to actually use that to catapult themselves up to the highest level of development. By and large, that hasn't happened, as many of you know. And that's a challenge and an issue that we in UNDP are very focused on. Secondly, I mentioned just now that we now, in our new global development agenda, have a specific focus on access to energy as a right and a fundamental driver of development. Now, this is not just energy in the broad sector sense. It's energy as a catalyst, a motivator for basic human development. Let me show you a little bit of what we mean. I wonder if this is going to play. Let's see. No, it seems to have disappeared. Yes. No, that's a pity because that was a great little 55-second video that was going to tell you most of what I needed to say. But that's okay, I'll move on. What we do in UNDP is we work with the poorest, the most disadvantaged, most remote communities in many cases, to help people get access to modern energy services. This is not just mineral-based, this is small-scale, renewable, off-grid electricity, heating, lighting, fuel wood, etc. Right? Now, how can a sector like the oil and gas industry in a place like Lebanon contribute to that overall goal? And I'll tell you why contributing to that is important. Because the more you can show that the development of the oil and gas sector in a country like this contributes to the health and well-being and happiness of the people in the country, the more sustainable and the more resilient the sector is going to be. So, in order to actually contribute to this goal, we've partnered here in UNDP Lebanon with the L.P.A. through a Memorandum of Understanding to help the L.P.A. create a framework by which companies in this sector can work with the government and with us to contribute directly to the benefits of development for the country. And we're doing this through a framework of regulated CSR. What we've proposed here, and which the L.P.A. has now agreed to, is that we will help create a framework to regulate, coordinate CSR activities by the oil and gas sector in the country over the next few years. This will be a framework that has a steering committee with membership from the L.P.A., UNDP to contribute, the oil and gas companies, representatives of the syndicates involved, NGOs, land ministries, etc. UNDP has offered to provide the secretariat for this, and also to provide technical support, monitoring and evaluation, project oversight, formulation, etc. And the idea is that this framework will be funded through resources from the CSR Trust Fund that the government is setting up. Now, why are we proposing to have a regulated or a structured CSR framework? Most of you are familiar, if you work in the sector, with the general idea of CSR. And in many cases, it's a little bit of a hit-and-miss giveaway. Companies respond to demands, requests from interested partners to do various pieces of work. But by and large, in most sectors, including oil and gas, if you talk to people within the sector, it's not clear where and how the sum total of all of that investment actually accomplishes very much in terms of broader aims. There is seldom a way in which those resources can be targeted to agreed priorities. There's seldom a way within which we can all collectively see the benefits of that for the country overall. So what we've proposed here is to create a framework, working with all the partners in the sector, to regulate or to structure how CSR activities by the oil and gas sector will be implemented over the next few years. I won't go into great detail on the benefits of it, because I think these are actually fairly evident to most of you. But I would stress that this is actually a framework that's going to be inclusive. It's going to be governed by people within the sector through the steering committee, with support from us to ensure that there's a degree of transparency and accountability for how the resources are managed. I won't dwell on this too much. Most of you understand the basics of sustainability. You know how we work on both the environmental, social, as well as the economic dimensions of it. So let me move on to the specifics in terms of next steps. UNDP signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the government earlier this year to set up this framework. Following on from this, we will actually be having consultations with people within the sector, civil society and others, on how to set this up. We will be looking at soliciting membership and participation from players within the sector, industry players as well as civil society and others, looking to set up the trust fund.